We are now finding ourselves in one of those crazy times when everything changes and everything changes so quickly that no one can really see past the event horizon of the big change. Nobody can really predict what it's going to look like on the other side. Think of the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, the internet. A lot of people are predicting that this change might even be bigger than any of those. However you feel about that notion, one thing is super clear right now. We've been standing in front of an unassailable castle for most of our lives. But what people are figuring out right now is that suddenly the moats are draining and it's time finally to storm the castles. If you are more than ready to scale those castle walls, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Let's see what we've got here. Raz was first. Yo, welcome. Thank you for joining, Raz. Thank you for joining. Hilldog is here. Thanks for joining, Hilldog, and thank you for that. Otis Freechov is here and says, emptying the moat. What about my sharks with freaking laser beams? Yeah, we're talking about emptying the moats. There will be no room for the sharks. Raz has got to hit that like button. Thank you for saying that. Otis Freechov says, let's go. Pucky Hawk is here and on time. Sub-Zero's here. Hello. Thanks for joining. Joe Davidson's here. Hi. Joe Davidson's happy to be here again. Thank you for joining. Curly Knox is here. And James Syracuse is here. Okay, a little bit smaller list on entry, but it always picks up. Joe Davidson says, Otis, are you the same? Otis, I see in the IR Discord. Get Me Hop says, what's good? Let's get it. Malcolm Y is here. Thank you for joining. Okay, so we've got something pretty important to talk about. Last night's conversation was also kind of, important. Michael's here. Hello. Vanessa's here. Hello, Vanessa. Thanks for joining. Otis Freechov responding to Joe there. So, okay. So let's go, Michael. Let's go. So last night's conversation was kind of, one of our more fun conversations. It was also, I think, important. We have to do that about once a year because people forget that wrench attacks are a thing. But this one, I think, is more conceptually, philosophically important. This is something that's actually important, I think, for all of us going forward. And it's because we're at a sort of a tipping point. We're at a sort of a tipping point in history. And this isn't going to be about international relations or geopolitics or economics. A little bit of it's about all of those things, but it's even more specific. I shouldn't say it's more specific. It's probably even more important for us in crypto because at its base, we can say that crypto is really math. We can say that crypto is math. Frazik is here. Thanks for joining. We can say that crypto is really math. What we're doing here is cryptography based. But it's not just that. It's not just math. Sure, we couldn't have had Bitcoin without hashing algorithms like SHA-256, which, originally was invented for, more like NSA cryptographic purposes, but we repurposed it. Whoever you think Satoshi was, Satoshi repurposed it for Bitcoin. So we couldn't have had it. We couldn't have had Bitcoin without math and cryptography. But you also can't really have Bitcoin, not in the way we know it. You can't have Bitcoin without software. Software has been something that has been a moat for economic enterprises for most of our lives. So I was around in the 90s. I was in college even in the 90s. Yes, I'm very old. I know. Everybody always says, oh, you're so old. Yes, I'm very old. I was in college in the 90s. And already throughout all the 90s, we were using software very, very regularly. And the moat created by code, even back then, was pretty much unassailable. You had software programs like word perfect. Even before Word, there was a thing called word perfect that some of you will have never heard of even. And it would have been utterly impossible for some fool like me in the 90s to decide to teach himself how to clone WordPerfect. Like I could have. I'm sure somebody far smarter than me could have taught themselves how to clone WordPerfect, and they could have built, many people did build their own WordPerfects. But that's a very tiny, tiny, super microscopic portion of the population who's able to do such things, right? A fool like me in the 90s was not cloning WordPerfect. Nothing of the sort. Completely impossible. It would have been like a medieval knight wearing super heavy armor, completely unable to swim, looking across a super deep moat, right? Software and code was a serious moat going clear back to the 90s, going clear back to the 80s. For most of our lives, software and code have been this moat that's very difficult to cross. Sure, software has been copied over and over again, but not by guys like me. That has never happened with guys like me. Those things are changing. You might still be that knight wearing super heavy armor who can't swim. You might be the astronaut in this thumbnail who also can't swim in his little astronaut suit, his little space suit. But something is draining the moats right now as we speak. Those moats, it could be that they used to be, 15 feet deep, 15 feet of water you were going to drown in. Suddenly, we're looking over the wall, seeing down in the moat, seeing nothing but stone and dirt. The moats are becoming crossable. And the wild thing that's going to start happening is people, normal people like you and me, not coding geniuses, are going to start flinging themselves over those castle walls, and it's going to change everything. So before we get to this, let's go to the comments, see what people are saying. Rulo's here. Hola, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Pucky Hawk's here. He says, yeah, old Haggerty. I also graduated college in the 90s. Yeah, we're old, dude. We're super old. Streetwise says Lotus. Yep, Lotus was around. Lotus was a thing. I could not imagine going through college on Windows 93. It was very fucking different. Very different. Very different. I went to college in the not in the early 90s. I'll put it that way. Not in the early 90s. But I did go to college in the 90s, and it was a very fucking different environment. We had to go to these weird places called libraries. we had the internet in college. The internet existed, but it wasn't the internet we all know today. It's a very different fucking internet. We had to have things called books. We had to have pencils, pens. We had to go to these libraries. It was wild, dude. Completely wild. Love the idea of zero knowledge proofs. It makes crypto usable as a currency. Yep, for sure. I did special effects, animation, etc. back in the 90s. It was just not easy at all. Yeah, agreed. When I was a freshman in college, I created a website in the 90s. And it was doable. It was all doable, just like so few people doing it. So few people doing this back then. Such a different environment. Totally different magnitude of people capable of doing these things. WordStar for MS-DOS. Ooh, bring back a lot of memories there. Now we have LLMs running around with all our code. IP will mean nothing. Okay, now we're getting into it. Curly Knox is already foreshadowing what we're going to talk about here. Ada will likely take over a large amount of finance. I hope so. Index cards. Yep, a lot of studying with index cards. 56K dial-up, yep. I had 14.4 dial-up. I had 28.8 dial-up, and certainly 56. What do we call it? I think we call it 56.6, right? Compass and Texas Instruments, yep. I went through calculus with I actually didn't have a TI. I had some kind of an HP, I think, but almost everybody in my calculus class had a TI for sure. Yep, same here. I went from 14.4 to 28.8, and then I think I was in college before they had a 56.6 back home, if I remember right. But I could be wrong about that. Grid paper, that was a thing. Yep. Number 2 pencil, floppy disks, Wolfenstein. Yep. Oh yeah, lots of things. Nico is here. Jay Coco is here. Crypto Invasion is here. I still have my TI. Puckyhawk says I had a Commodore 12840 with 3 CPUs, the first and last computer that could run anything out of the box. All right. All right. Let's jump into it. What the hell are we talking about? So, first off, a little housekeeping. My Twitter handle has changed. I'm only mentioning this so that people, if they want to tag me in something, they can tag me correctly. I could not get when I started this account in March of 2021. I could only get Army Spies because someone had been sitting on the Army of Spies account since long before Army of Spies and Cardano was a thing. They weren't like they weren't squatting on it or anything. They just chose that name a long time ago and they hadn't done anything with their account. So as you probably know, Twitter started a new service where if there's an abandoned handle, you can steal it basically. So I stole this handle from that abandoned account. Apologies to that person. So sorry, but you didn't use it. So I stole it. So I now have the of in the name. So you won't have to worry about trying to match the Twitter handle to the name of the account, all that craziness. Anyways, that's done. Army of Spies is back to being Army of Spies. I guess for the first time, being Army of Spies on Twitter at Army of Spies. So let's get to what we're talking about here, though. So let's see. Troll Toll, welcome. Thanks for joining. Stop picking up the phone, Mom. Yep, exactly. If somebody got on the phone, it's a problem. Droid, use the handle. Marketplace. They just kind of prompted me like, hey, you can steal handles from people. And I was like, sweet. I know exactly which one I'm going to steal. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Yep. Stolen. I honestly wouldn't have done it. And I don't think they would have allowed me to if it wasn't an abandoned account. But this person literally had not used it. I checked to make sure they hadn't used it recently because I obviously would not have attempted it if they had used it anytime in the last many, many, many years. But they literally used this account to post like a couple times years and years and years ago and then completely abandoned it. So I don't feel bad about it. Pirating a name from X is yeah, I did not feel bad at all. But yes, successfully stolen. So very happy about that. Okay, so here's what made me think about this. So DVNC, you did not miss a damn thing. You didn't miss a damn thing. So we're going to jump into it right now. Your timing is perfect. So here's what made me think about this. Brian Armstrong posted this. At some point, you will get an urge to vibe code an app. He posted this yesterday. At some point, you will get an urge to vibe code an app. It's very important that you listen to that urge and just get started. So I also think this is important. I agree with Brian Armstrong very, very much, right? You will find a lot of people talking shit about vibe coding on Twitter right now. And many of them are legitimate coders who actually have some coding ability. And let's face it, many of us, if we'd spent our lives becoming good coders, we would probably also talk shit on vibe coding because it makes it possible for people like me to code shit I have no business coding. So I wouldn't even call it coding. Creating things, building things, I have no business being able to build. GD Extreme is here. Thanks for joining. Dolph B. Wolf says morally responsible pirate. Good morning. Puckyhawk says I can code if my life depended on it, but I will not do it voluntarily. Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I am. I don't want to belabor this because I've talked about it before. Crypto Gypsy's here. Greetings. Thank you for joining from Australia. I'm guessing Australia. Ada all the way. Yeah, thanks for joining. Apologies if it's really like New Zealand or somewhere else. Apologies. If it's not Australia, but just guessing. I had done a tiny bit. I had taken like the Khan Academy JavaScript course back in the day, which was mainly about graphics. It mainly taught you how to do graphics. I think I took that back in like 2016 or 2017, something like that. And I had created some small little thing. It was something that ran in the browser, but it was graphical. So I had done a little bit with JavaScript and forgotten every single thing I knew about JavaScript. And I've talked many times ad nauseum about the like 6 months I spent, trying to learn Haskell and going through like 600 pages of that giant 1,200 page textbook. You've all heard that before. I won't get back into that. Emilio is here. Good morning. Good morning. Josh Mick says, I'm a software dev and I'm not too worried about vibe coding. I think that's great. And a lot of software devs are also exactly like Josh Mick here, not worried about it. You will also find a lot of them, not a lot. You will find some percentage of actual software developers who are, they spend a decent amount of time talking shit about vibe coding, and rightfully so. But it doesn't change the fact that vibe coding has made it possible for people to build things they have no business building, like myself. He says, building cool things is easier than ever, and based on current trends, it's going to keep getting easier. This is a good thing. Blockers are disappearing. I agree with this because there's been this moat, and I'm not talking about, before we talked about cloning software, just as an example of how hard it would be to build something meaningful, if you hadn't actually developed development skills. But the core thing here is that there are billions of humans, billions of humans on Earth. Only a small percentage of them will ever learn to code anything. But those billions of humans, almost all of them have ideas. Some of them are laying in hospital beds in a coma, and we can argue about how many ideas they have, how much brain activity is actually going on. But we'll say, almost all the billions of humans have ideas. They can't bring those ideas to life. And whenever you take a very small sliver of any kind of a pool, you are probably not getting the very best out of the pool when you only take a small sampling in the pool, right? For example, if we grab 5 people off the street, just random people, and we have them run a 100-meter race, right? We are unlikely to have one of those 5 people run as fast a time as if we took 1,000 people off the street and had them all run a 100-meter race. It's unlikely that the fastest person out of the 1,000 is going to be one of the 5. It's much more likely that the fastest person is in that other 995 people. The same is true of this idea thing. All humans have ideas. And it's because there's a small percentage of humans who ever learn to code, it's much more likely that the best ideas are living as these little seedling ideas in the brains of some of these people who will never learn to code. Vibe coding has changed that. You can also argue, hey, only a small percentage of people will ever learn to vibe code because only a certain percentage of people even have access to computers and the internet, right? Those numbers are all growing, but those are all numbers, right? The number of people who can vibe code is greater. The number of people who have the potential to vibe code is greater than the number of people who will learn to code sufficiently to build the same things without AI that they can build with AI, right? I think we can all agree on that. Things are vastly changing. And so a lot of these guys like me and gals who who do not have sufficient coding skills now can throw themselves over the castle wall because there's no moat. The moat has been drained. The hashtag learn to code thing, you can make very good arguments that you should still learn to code. I think there's very persuasive arguments in that direction, but the moat is now empty if you can access AI, if you can type to AI, if you can talk to AI in any way. We've all seen the vast amount of traffic on Twitter lately around Claude, but it's almost like you could use any of the leading AI engines. They can all do things for you code-wise, at least for me. They can all do things code-wise that I certainly cannot do by myself. So that's the great part of it. The great part of it is there's going to be a bunch of idiots like me flinging themselves over the wall, vibe coding things they have no business building, flinging themselves over the wall. And any decent coder is easily going to be able to pick out the mistakes and the other elements of idiocy in the things that guys like me build. But regardless, there are a lot of us flinging ourselves over the wall, and things are going to get built that wouldn't have gotten built before. So this is a vastly different environment. Castles are no longer castles because they no longer have moats. They no longer even really have walls. It's just kind of this open thing now. A lot more ideas are going to come to life that never came to life before. Pucky Hawk says, Chalk Milk is here. Says, let's go, Chalk Milk. Pucky Hawk says, I had to learn to code ray tracing. That was kind of fun, actually, but today is a walk in the park. Unreal Engine is super advanced and can write AI. Okay. Won't be long before somebody vibe codes up botnet to DDoS that little website Brian Armstrong runs. That's probably the kind of stuff that keeps Brian Armstrong up at night. And we're actually going to talk about it almost exactly this. I vibe coded midnight API mining. Okay, maybe I know who this is. Maybe I know who Coop to Scoop is actually now, because I know of at least one other person who vibe coded an API miner. But there are probably multiple people who vibe coded API miners. But that was a really good example, actually. The fact that people were popping up saying they vibe coded API miners during the midnight scavenger mine, that was one of the first big indications in Cardano specific of how many people were using AI for coding, non-coders basically using AI for coding and finding success. Puckyhawk says, I have no idea how to do or even what vibe coding is. Omar Wright says, howdy, let's go. Saw this meme that went, have access to all the world's information readily available, the most access in history, become the dumbest generation in history. It's possible. I mean, there's drawbacks. Okay, now that you explain it, I'm okay losing my sharks. Chaos Ensues says, I work at a startup and it's really scary to think about how tenuous the competitive edge is when code is so easy with AI and ideas can be replicated. We are creating a society in which humans aren't able to create anymore, and over-reliance on AI will come to cost. The cost seems too high to me. Yeah, we're going to find out if the cost is too high. But in the meantime, it is draining that moat that code used to be, right? It seemed impossible to me back in the day that I would be able to just vibe code up my own version of WordPerfect and then later Word, Excel, some of these kind of platforms, and it could, even be a shadow of the original product. But I mean, as of today, I feel pretty confident I could vibe code up, pretty much everything that WordPerfect was back in 1995 or whatever. I feel pretty confident I could do that pretty easily. Let's see. Josh Mick says learning to code is essentially learning formal Boolean logic and a few basic patterns. Engineering larger systems takes a lot more understanding. Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting things to me about learning Haskell was that the first chapter was just like straight lambda calculus, which I hadn't previously learned. It was like one of the most interesting parts of the whole little Haskell adventure was learning lambda calculus. Probably something that, I can't say it was bad that I learned that. So, but it's pretty much just logic. It's pretty much is just logic. Remember PGP had to be given away because the government classified cryptography as a munition. I remember. Anecdotally, the internet lowered the collective IQ. I predict the same thing, but worse. And I am here for it. Yep. I'm thinking of collating all my emissions at once at the end. I wouldn't lose any, would I? So far I've been doing the same thing. I've had at least 2 come through, and I haven't collected them. So for anybody who doesn't understand, we're talking when people reference nocturnal emissions on this channel, they're really referencing their glacier drop allocations becoming available. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So this is really interesting to me because here's the interesting part. We just talked about all the positive benefits. Guys like me who don't have the skill set really to code up anything interesting can now code up interesting things, right? That's the good part. Here's the part that's maybe here's the part that's a little bit more, I don't know what we want to call it, action oriented. This might produce a little more friction. Things might kind of move around based on this part. So here's the part that's interesting. In this world, this is Gabe Shapiro posting. In this new world, IP rights will be close to irrelevant, in my opinion, similar to how crypto DDoSed the securities laws. I think this was the biggest use case of crypto, at least, at least post the ICO craze. Basically, there were so many ICOs and it was so weird. It was like a DDoS of the security laws. It was arbitrary. It was regulatory arbitrage. And he's saying here, AI will do the same to IP rights. This means the main way to monetize your code will be to make it an autonomous system that is Lindy, cost to use, already deployed. I think this is just an image, so we can't. I've talked about this particular post before, but the moat will no longer be being able to produce the code to do the thing that your platform or DApp or piece of software, whatever it is, being able to produce the code that does the thing is no longer going to be the moat. The only moats that will exist will be attention, community, things like this. Being able to produce the code will no longer be enough. You won't be able to just produce the code and be like, ha, I'm the one who produced the code. Everybody else is screwed. Everybody will be able to produce the code, on a long enough timeline. We'll say roughly. I'm sure really good devs would, have examples to challenge that. Fair enough. But we'll say for a lot of things, pretty much anybody will be able to produce the code that does the thing. And the only real moat will be community and attention. People, accumulating around your particular instance of code that does the thing, because a lot of people will be able to produce code that does the thing. So Scolder says, word perfect, laugh out loud, got to reveal them codes and get them line numbers on your legal filings. Dude, I miss reveal codes. People who never used word perfect won't know what the hell we're talking about, but reveal codes was great. You could actually go in and directly sort of edit the code that was producing the formatting you saw on the page. So when you had that really stubborn formatting you couldn't get rid of, you could just go in and delete the code that was in your document that was producing that formatting. It was fabulous. We lost something when we lost that for sure. Otis Freeshove says, I'm waiting to the end for my drops as well. Streetwise says, I think it will probably help actual coders code a lot more efficiently and amplify. Absolutely. No question. I'm not an actual coder, but just based on the bullshit I could do with it, I would imagine it's going to be crazy what an actual coder could do with it. To who said, and they already are. We know this based on the percentage of code at Google that is now being produced by AI. It's shocker, not going down, going up, and it's already very significant. Charles has talked about this. He's talked about how much of the code at I/O is being produced by AI. It's large and increasing. To who said they don't know how to vibe code, start by using Notepad and asking the AI to give you stuff to copy and paste into a text editor and save it in the format and file location as instructed. Yep. Yeah, just start talking to the AI. It can have you create stuff you can deploy. No, it is still more efficient in the code to do it manually, but that gap is closing fast. Not for me, it's not. For me, it is definitely not more efficient to do it manually. Eventually upgrade to running pull commands using command to install dependencies and going into files, rewrite lines or chunks. Also, if you ask for the AI to chunk the code and explain with comments what is happening, yeah, it's really useful that it can actually explain the code. Since RAM and GPUs are made of unobtainium, I wonder if any of these game devs could use AI to optimize their games like you had to back in the day. Good question. Mission Zambia, good morning. Good to see you. Oh, yep, Australia. Okay, good. I didn't want to get in trouble for saying you were somewhere you were not. Okay, so let's go a little deeper on this. So this is kind of all the good part of this. What Brian Armstrong's talking about, what I've talked about so far, is the good part. What Gabe Shapiro is talking about is going to be a little bit more of a fourth turning kind of thing, because there will be winners and losers to this. So the losers will be the incumbent companies who have used code as a moat for so long. I have definitely I definitely have intimate knowledge of companies like this that, their only moat is the code, because no one else can put together the code. So far, no one else could put together the code to do the thing that their code did, and that's all going to change. Um, here's what we're really talking about, though. Here's the big thing. So this is Dave Shapiro. You see me post some of his post-labor economic stuff before, but this is really the big thing. He says, and I think he put it well here. You guys realize that all software is about to be free, right? So think about that. All software is about to be free, and software is presently the most valuable capital asset, right, guys? Elon Musk echoing this pretty much. This is a dude, if you go to his YouTube channel, it doesn't get that many views. I mean, he gets a lot of views, but it's not crazy like this. He doesn't get 1 million views on his regular YouTube videos. But when he writes it like this, people get it. And even Elon Musk has to go on and let people know that he agrees with this. So what he's saying is software about to be free. Unfortunately, software is also our most valuable thing. It's the most valuable thing we have, right? Software is the most valuable thing we have, and it's about to be free. That is some huge fourth turning change shit. This is not a small change. This is a gigantic change. The way I wrote it here 9 months ago was as the cost of code approaches zero. So this was Shapiro 3 days ago. 9 months ago, I wrote, as the cost of code approaches zero, it is no longer a moat that instantiates value. This is a problem because this giant asset, a lot of us spend, all day on Twitter talking about, he's saying that huge asset is about to be free. Unfortunately, it's also our most valuable asset. This is a pretty big shift, right? This is a pretty big seismic shift. Luckily, it's not like somebody snaps their fingers and it happens all at once, but it might as well be, because there's a bunch of bastards like me out there figuring out that we can code a lot of stuff we never could before. In my case, I had this idea for something, an idea I've had for a long time. And in November, I just started vibe coding that thing. In November, I just started vibe coding that thing, started actually, dropping lines of code into a GitHub and deploying it. And sure enough, finally today, went through a very long process of failed deployments. I went back and looked today, and I think at one point I had like something crazy, like 76 deployments. My code failed in a row before I finally figured out how to fix something. Me and the AI, I figured out basically nothing, but I was somehow able to guide the AI to help me figure out what had been screwed up. There was a lot of like the AI, me not managing context correctly for the AI forgetting things and running us in circles. And gradually you get better at managing the context for the AI, not letting it run you in circles, not letting it go off on fanciful jaunts that are completely unnecessary. I think anybody who's dealt with AI knows what I'm talking about. But over the course of this, like now it's like probably almost a month and a half of vibe coding, finally today, a lot of you probably realize that the preview testnet for midnight is live. You can actually use the preview testnet right now, and there is a preview Lace wallet. There's a Lace wallet for the midnight preview testnet. We'll just call it a testnet, although the thing that people generally call the midnight testnet is a different sort of instance of a testnet. Anyways, today, after a month and a half, finally, of all this vibe coding, going around in circles, learning things about coding and about and about AI, finally, I was able to get the Lace wallet to hook up to the thing that I was building. It's not done yet. There's a lot more to do, but that was kind of an amazing moment to me, that I actually built something that something in crypto was actually able to interact with. That was quite shocking to me that I finally got to that point. Had many instances of mini deployments that failed over and over and over iteratively, and I've kind of been stuck trying to get this wallet to connect to this thing I built for about the last week. Finally got it to connect today, and that was very surprising to me. Let's see. Okay. Joe Davidson says, literally all software is about a free. I just use something to use .svg files as a data compression algorithm. Going to try to turn that somehow into a product or something useful. Puckyhawk says, we're on the edge of change, and that is like being between two things, which is basically Gen X in a nutshell. I'm ready. Yep, Gen X. I'm also Gen X. We are definitely in between the boomers and the millennials. Two much larger generations. We're a smaller generation. Let's hope this kills paid codecs for media playback. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I'm with you on that. Isn't there a French media player that is super free and totally awesome? I forget the name. Yeah. VLC. Yep. Somebody down here just said, just use VLC. I used to use it back in the day for sure. I vibe coded something that is going to use midnight soon. Well, as soon as mainnet launches. Yep. Eventually, we will all have bots out earning money for us. Seems very possible. Yep, VLC, that's the French one. I didn't even realize it was French, to be honest with you. Thoughts of Zcash devs leaving. We can talk about it. Yep, VLC. Okay, so this is a big seismic shift, guys. This is not a small thing. This is one of those giant things. Think about our biggest companies. Think about how many of our biggest companies basically only have a moat of code, right? I agree with Josh Mick right here. There's a reason. Josh Mick says, when the software becomes free, the data becomes the store of value for companies instead of IP. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Elon is so happy to have his cars out driving on the road. He's so happy to have those cars out driving on the road for all these years because he's got all the data. He's got all the data, more data from cars out there driving around than anybody else. Far, far more data because I think he knew, being basically one of the founders of OpenAI back in the day when it was still open and nonprofit. We'll talk about that too a little bit later. He knew what was going to happen. When he realized how powerful AI was going to become, he instantly realized that this moat of code was not going to be a thing, that software would eventually become free. Eventually, we get to this point we're now hitting in 2026, and that data was going to be the big thing. Coincidentally, he later bought Twitter. What is on Twitter, right? Twitter is a social media platform of which there are many. But what else is on Twitter? On Twitter is the collective thoughts of a huge chunk of the online public, an amazing amount of people producing thoughts and ideas and writings, a whole bunch of data coming out of human heads. And now Elon has all that too. He has all the thoughts of a lot of really smart people. Because let's face it, people sit around on Twitter all day. Not all of them, but a lot of them, significantly smarter than the average person. They're a little bit sharper, right? They like to read. They're on Twitter reading as opposed to watching TikTok. A little bit smarter than your average, person, maybe just doom scrolling TikTok. Elon's got the intellectual output of all of those brains. Everything they type into Twitter, he has that now too. He's got all of that, and he's got everything that happens around a Tesla anywhere in the world on any road that there is a Tesla. This is the data. He knew what he was going after because he knew the software wasn't where the action was going to happen. It was for a long, he knew that the action was going to happen there for a long time, but he also knew that eventually the software would not be the moat. The data would be the moat. Michael says vibe coding is a listen. Not just the data, the relationships. Yep. I think it's hard for us as individuals it's hard for us on a micro scale to think about collecting data the same way a Tesla would or a Twitter would. But there is what I said a little bit earlier in this video, and that's that the other moat, the thing that would exist, would be attention and community, right? Which is one of the reasons I think this supports Cardano, right? Nobody uses the biggest meme coin casinos if they're not the fastest and the easiest to use to be a meme coin casino, right? The community is just based on the applicability to that meme coin casino thing. In Cardano, there's a very, very strong community. So what we're seeing right now with Midnight is we're seeing Charles copying consensus mechanisms from elsewhere, copying, programming languages from elsewhere. It's like everything is becoming duplicatable, right? They didn't invent, I mean, you could argue compact is kind of, DSL of TypeScript, but basically TypeScript. TypeScript, they didn't invent a whole new language that nobody's familiar with for Midnight. All of these things are just other software that existed out there. They're just duplicated other software. Jolteon consensus, right? It's like he didn't reinvent the wheel for anything in Midnight, but the big advantage Charles had, you could argue there's probably some very good architecture in combining those different components in Midnight. And, I mean, IOG has certainly done its share of novel science in, crypto and cryptography. We've seen the papers, but the really, really strong thing Midnight had going for it was all of us. It was the Cardano community. The Cardano community was largely going to get behind Midnight in a big way. This is the community thing. This is the community thing. Because in Cardano, we're not just a bunch of mercenaries who are here because Cardano has the highest TPS. That is not the case. Cardano does not have the highest TPS. Is Cardano the easiest to write smart contracts on? Not at all. Functional programming is not the most widely distributed mode of programming. Is Haskell the most widely used language? Not at all. Even when we talk about Aiken, and some of the other better solutions for writing smart contracts on Cardano, it's not the easiest place to develop. We know that because virtually every developer has told us that. The reason people have stuck around Cardano are other reasons, and only a really strong community could get Cardano through these early stages. So I think this really supports Cardano. Cardano has a super strong community, and the things we build here benefit from that community. Whereas, the things that made certain blockchains the top meme coin casinos, that was all just software, and that moat going away. Twitter is the stream of consciousness of the global society operating live. I agree with that. Awfully bold of you to assume everyone has a human head. That's true. You know who doesn't have a human head? Well, maybe it's the opposite. You know who does have a human head in cryogenic storage, if I remember right? This could be spurious. So somebody tell me if I'm lying here, but I think everybody knows my main candidate for Satoshi is Hal Finney. Charles is convinced it's Adam Back. I think Hal Finney spoofed the British English and, just like To Work at Night, which made it look like he was someone educated in British academia working in a British time zone. I think it was Hal Finney. And if I remember right, I think Hal Finney's head might be in cryogenic storage. Somebody look that up and tell me if I'm right about that. But I kind of think Hal Finney's head is in cryogenic storage. Matt, glad you made it. What's a good hardware wallet for ADA? I used to say Ledger, but did a whole video last night about Ledger's the many security problems that have been encountered by those of us who have ledgers. So sort of like take your pick, Frazik says AI will be a huge win for centralization, power in the hands of the few. Yeah, we'll see. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. Pucky Hawk uses a Tangent wallet. Coop to Scoop. KC says, are you going to tell us what you are building? I will at some point, not yet. Josh Mick uses a Trezor. DVNC uses Ledger or Keystone plus Eternal or Lace. Tangem is basic, simple, hard to mess up, and secure. Keystone is the best hardware wallet. I'm not sure we'll need a hardware wallet in the future. I definitely feel like I need one now. It still says Army Spies in the video description, FYI. Oh, thanks for letting me know. I'll fix that. Thank you for alerting me to that. You're right. You're right. His whole body is okay. His whole body is in cryogenic storage. So there you go. Trezor, no issues so far. So you'll always find proponents of different hardware wallets whenever you ask this question in crypto. James says, I always said I can't wait for BTC to hit 1 million. He comes back and gets unfrozen and cures his ALS, is the richest man in the world. I would love that. If Hal Finney really is Satoshi and they're able to unfreeze him and cure his ALS and he's the richest man in the world, I would feel like poetic justice was done for sure. So here's the really interesting thing. David Shapiro, the reason why I think he's able to describe this so concisely is because he spent a lot of time thinking about post-labor economics. And I just want to make people aware of one thesis, and this is his thesis, as to the solution. You've heard a lot of people talk about UBI. That's something we've talked about a lot in crypto, and how, maybe even crypto would be the tool used to distribute UBI, all those kind of discussions. That's not what we're going to talk about. His solution, he's like, okay, fine. There's got to be some kind of, as somebody mentioned above in the comments, there's a fear that AI produces this dislocation of value, produces a centralization of the ownership of the only things that matter, right? People have nightmares, depending on what side of this political spectrum you're on. People have nightmares about either OpenAI or Grok controlling everything. And it turns out more recently, we have other platforms, other models like Claude that are doing super, super well. So it's turning out to be more of a multipolar world than people feared it was going to be, like even 18 months ago. 18 months ago, it seemed like OpenAI was just going to destroy everything. And Sam Altman was going to be the richest man in the world, which scared a lot of people on the other side of the political spectrum from him. And then Grok started surging, and that scared everybody on the other side of the political spectrum from Elon. But now we're seeing more and more platforms that are getting a lot of attention, and it's becoming more clear it's going to be a little bit more of a multipolar world. In fact, Joe Davidson says, I'm vibe coding a locally running LLM that is based off of Claude Opus 4.5. When the next best version of Claude is released, I'll be using that to fix this current program and repeat until it's done. Yep. I'm scared to ask it to write a program for actually interacting with the blockchain, but that's what I'm about to do. There you go. Troll Toll says, rest in peace, my future gaming PC. Yeah. But David Shapiro, he's like, okay, yeah, there's going to have to be some kind of universal income, right? Because the problem is, if it's not just that, even in this bipolar conception of AI company ownership, that Sam Altman or Elon win everything, now we know it's probably going to be a little bit more multipolar than that, which is great. But there's also a bigger problem. If AI replaces all of the cognitive labor, and it's looking like that's going to be the case, right? It's like we have every indication right now that AI is going to replace all of the cognitive labor. The thing that I do for fiat mining, the thing that a lot of people in similar professions do, I think everybody I talk to, we all agree that AI can replace our cognitive labors. The problem with that is not just that all of the cognitive labor will be done by software owned by the Sam Altmans of the world. It's that if none of us have jobs, we won't be able to buy any of the products anyways. And this is a demand-driven economy. This is a consumer economy, right? If you don't have the consumer spending, everything collapses anyways. So even if Sam Altman owns all the AIs, and again, it's really going to be a multipolar world, but for simplicity, let's just say Sam A. If Sam A owns all the AI and the AI is doing all the cognitive labor, humans won't have paychecks. And if the consumers don't have paychecks, they don't buy things. So it doesn't matter if you replace all of the physical labor with robotics and you replace all the cognitive labor with AI, nobody has any paychecks to buy anything. So even Sam A doesn't make money. Sam A doesn't make money. So you've got to put money in the hands of the consumers. If you have a consumer economy, you have to have money in the hands of the consumers. Otherwise, there's no demand for the products anyways. This is a huge kind of circular problem. So the solution that some people come to, of course, is universal basic income. Elon famously has called it instead universal high income. I like his optimism about a future of plenitude and bounty as opposed to a future of, degenerate downward spiral and, low universal basic income. That sounds terrible. We don't want it to look like we don't want it to look like welfare. The high basic income sounds a lot better. But no matter what you think the level of income should be under this idea of putting money in the hands of the consumers to fuel the demand in the consumer economy, the money's got to come from somewhere. So the idea people like David Shapiro here have had is, okay, you can't just tax these companies. If you just tax the Elons and the Sam Altmans of the world, what happens? We saw this last night with California's billionaire tax. What happens? Larry Page and Ellison just leave California, right? Dudes who've lived in California forever just leave California. They don't want to pay those taxes. So you don't want to have this race to the bottom where every jurisdiction in the world is trying to see how little they can tax these companies. It'll just be like the race to the bottom for crypto regulation, where you saw companies like Binance jumping around. 1 week they're in Singapore, then they're in Malta, then they're in Dubai. They're just kind of jumping around doing the regulatory arbitrage thing that crypto's so famous for. You don't want that with this UBI thing. If UBI comes from taxes, right? If all of a sudden the federal government's like, hey, Sam Altman, we're going to tax OpenAI super, super heavily. He's like, sweet, we're a Grand Cayman entity now. Screw you guys in the US, right? And you get in this battle and you start saying like, okay, well, yeah, then the US will block OpenAI, won't let OpenAI serve US customers, that kind of thing. But there's another solution proposed by these people like David Shapiro. They're like, no, that's actually not how you do it. The way you do it is something we already have examples of in the world. Those are sovereign wealth funds. We've seen these in rich Gulf states, right? The oil states in the Persian Gulf. We know about their sovereign funds, places like Norway. A lot of countries around the world have sovereign funds, rich countries. He thinks that's the way we've got to go. And the thing the sovereign funds will invest in are the AI companies. So the sovereign funds invest in the AI companies. They get dividends from those AI companies. And that's where the money comes from. That way you avoid this race to the bottom where everybody becomes, all the AI companies become like Tuvalu corporations. They all incorporate in Tuvalu because Tuvalu is like, hey, we won't tax you guys. They'll all incorporate there, and then they just end up in this fight where we're trying to arrest them for serving US customers, all those kind of things. Same problems Binance had, right? It's not actually why CZ went to prison, but they were encountering these same kind of problems. So we're familiar with this. We don't want that future. Instead, there's this sovereign wealth fund approach where the government has a sovereign wealth fund and invests in the AI companies. And then the money that goes to the consumers comes out of dividends paid to the sovereign wealth fund. So this is more sort of a theoretical economics conversation more than anything else. But it does sort of like mend that disconnect. As a lot of you know, I'm a hardcore capitalist. I love to fight with the commies. Some of you are probably commies. That's okay. I'm not mad at you for being commies, but I will definitely oppose you where I can on social media. And it's fun for me to do it. So I'm a hardcore capitalist, which made UBI a little troublesome. When you start talking about UBI, things start sounding pretty commie pretty fast. And anytime you're talking about putting money in the hands of the consumers, not based on their labor, it starts sounding pretty uncapitalist. But I think this sovereign wealth fund thing fits into capitalism a lot better than some of the more simplistic approaches to UBI that we've heard. And actually, the sovereign wealth fund actually matches Elon's conception of HBI or HUI. Wait, UHI, sorry, UHI, universal high income, a lot better, right? Because what we see in countries that have these sovereign wealth funds is that they do have universal high income. And we don't just see it with nation states. A lot of very famous universities have their own funds, and they basically operate a lot like sovereign wealth funds. But this is just to assure people that there's a way to cross this chasm without becoming the Soviet Socialist Republic of the Americas, right? There's a way to, I think there's a way to do this without, having to decide we all have to become commies. So let's see what people are saying in the comments. Joe Davis says, going to tattoo accept all onto my body so the AI overlords know how to handle my body disposal. There you go. Pucky Hawk says, take it light, give it a go, and do it with extreme confidence. Matt says, what I like about Hot Wallet is you can delete it from any browser on any device and either take the device on travel with you anywhere or buy a new device at destination and recover with seed. Yeah, you can do that with cold storage too. You can do that with your hardware wallet as well. I mean, they're all just like devices for, I mean, your wallet is really your seed phrase, and the hardware wallet is just a device for signing. It's just a device for, you can think of it as a device for signing transactions, basically with your seed phrase. That's all the hardware wallet does. Prince Doza says, I like Jello. Okay. Why don't the 1%ers seem to understand this now? I think they already do. I think the 1%ers already understand this. They're just, it's sort of like, when you see these really smart guys on podcasts, these 1%ers on podcasts, and they're saying like, I think the future is this, but then you find out they're like super invested in like, General Motors or something, they're like, sort of like, I think this is what happens over the long term, but I'm not willing to pass up the gains on this other, less than high tech thing in the meantime. I think that's what's going on. I think they're just like, we'll take those gains where we can get them, but we all know the future is this thing, right? It's like, as long as these software-based companies are providing gains to us, we're going to take them because it might be our last chance to get them. I don't know if that's the question you were asking, but that's the way I think about it. You can do that with any hardware wallet also. Yep, that's exactly Puckyhawk saying the same thing I was saying. I love the term fiat mining. It cracks me up. I'm using it to describe life. Yep, absolutely. Fly over me. Let's go. Thanks for joining. That's why they want a one world government. Yeah, I mean, if you're a smaller nation and you don't have the ability to buy into the entities that are going to control the AIs that do the cognitive labor, then you got a problem. So that's assuming that they can't create their own. So, what could happen in a lot of these countries, obviously it's not impossible to spill up. It's not difficult even to spin up your own LLM these days, right? Even if you're several generations behind, the LLMs are super powerful and can do a lot of things. So I think it's going to be this thing where, even these very small nations, it'll be the same thing there. Maybe not on such a crazy scale, but AI is going to do the cognitive labor. And, probably whatever model ends up working, maybe it's the sovereign wealth fund kind of model. Everybody will copy that. Everybody will do it. Just like every country has central banks, they all copied that central bank model. They'll all copy this sovereign wealth fund model once they realize that the cognitive labor is going to be done by AI. And I mean, there'll be different rates of acceleration on this, a very non-high tech society and jurisdiction. They're probably going to come to this point where the consumers no longer have jobs, so no longer have paychecks, so no longer can produce the demand in the consumer economy. They'll probably come to that later than the rest of us. They'll probably get robotics to produce replace the human labor, the physical labor later than us. They'll get, a density of AI that destroys the cognitive labor market for humans much later than us. So it'll happen at different stages, but I think, they'll all kind of get there. Will it make it more likely that, we'll have fewer nation states. Nation states will start combining. It could be that, or it could be that it's kind of the trading block thesis, so that as the US stops being the world police and it's just the Western Hemisphere police, that we'll just get trading blocks, and maybe, if China has its own trading block, it may or may not care to do the actual governance of some of those jurisdictions. It'll just want them, maybe in their trading block. Same thing for Europe, probably the same thing for like Turkey, same thing for various countries. They may not, the larger powers may not want to directly rule some of those countries. They may just want them in their trading blocks as consumers, or, prior to AI taking over the cognitive labor as labor, that kind of thing. Your crypto is stored in the blockchain, not actually in your wallet. So you can use the seed phrase, put your wallet into anything that's a wallet. Yep. I heard the notion of taxing the loans that they are living off and writing off twice today from 2 different sources. Yeah, super common, super common. Instead of selling your assets, you just take a loan on your assets. If you think your asset is going to keep appreciating, you just take a loan on the asset, and then the asset appreciates. So this is a pretty widely discussed strategy. Okay, what are you doing on social media if you are anti-communist? Good question. Good question. $10 ADA is the only UBI I need. I'm with you, Flying Hambo, and I'm with you. Thoughts on Grok giving high price predictions recently? Multiple reports stating $10 USD. Yeah, pretty hilarious. I mean, you can get different prices out of Grok, definitely, depending on how you ask the question. So I don't believe any human or any large language model knows the future of the markets. The second people are reading the large language model's predictions, that's becoming an input into the market. That expectation is becoming an input into the market. It moves the market. So, the one thing we know about markets is that humans are notoriously bad for predicting them. I don't believe that anybody can predict them. So that's the way I feel about that. Not like a bank where you have to contact the bank to delete account and the bank can close your account without your permission. This is the beauty of crypto wallets. Yep, it's nice. It's nice to be bankless for sure. I'm not very few of us are probably bankless. Probably none of us are bankless. I'm certainly not bankless, but being able to be bankless on this crypto side of the world is good. Olama is an okay lightweight LLM. Llama. Okay, but I've heard they fudge their benchmarks. Yeah, I read that recently. Llama is an ex, supposedly. I haven't verified this, so I'll just say supposedly. The reports I saw was that an ex Llama engineer was accusing them of having, actually not even, as I'm recalling now, wasn't even an ex Llama engineer. It was the guy who, kind of a guy who, I believe he's sort of, a lot of people would position him as sort of like a father of modern AI. He made some comments that made people believe that they were, not being totally intellectually honest about those benchmarks. Specifically, I think it was like using different models for different metrics to score as high as possible on different metrics without people necessarily understanding that was the case. One world government. I hope not. This is going to all become idiots when the brain work is all done by AI. Possibly. Like, how do seed phrase generator crackers not exist? Just keep checking random 24 words, and if there's a balance, store that seed phrase, and on to the next. Okay, so in the early days of Bitcoin, I had a PowerPoint presentation I would give to explain this to people. And in that PowerPoint, there was a meme that used to make the rounds on crypto Reddit. Back in the day, it wasn't really crypto Twitter that was big. It was crypto Reddit. And, before that, it was the Bitcoin Talk forums. But there was a meme that showed the sun. And it pointed out that the number of possible private keys in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is based on SHA-256, and the number of private keys that are possible in Bitcoin, according to this meme, are roughly equivalent to the number of atoms in the sun. So that's why people talk about SHA-256 not being cracked until we have real quantum computing, because the numbers are so immense. You just can't produce enough computing power to go through the number of possible numbers. So, think about the way Bitcoin mining works, like the way ASICs work. They're just looking for a nonce that produces a digest, an output from SHA-256. You call the thing on the other side, the output, the product, you call it the digest. So the nonce is combined with some other things, becomes an input into that SHA-256 hashing algorithm. And then on the other side, it produces a target. It produces a digest, and you win the block if you were the first one to produce a digest that's under the target for that block, which is set by the system, by the Bitcoin, system, Bitcoin, by the blockchain, basically. It's adjusted. It's the difficulty. It's adjusted based on how much hashing power there is on the network. But the way they do that is the way you're describing it. They just start running nonces. They run, one number, then the next number, then the next number, and they just grind until somebody hits a nonce that is combined with some other things to be the input into SHA-256 and hits a digest that's below that target number. So that's the way it works. But that target is much easier to achieve than cracking a random, cracking a private key. Yep. There you go. You can, so to explain, another way to explain this, and this should be a part of my PowerPoint, is you can guess I don't know if people know about this, but people in Cardano know a little bit about paper wallets. So paper wallets are really kind of similar to brain wallets. So back in the day, people thought they were really smart, and they would put Bitcoin into brain wallets, and it would just be like, a famous quote from a novel, right? And so what people would do is online right now, you can find little websites that do this very simple thing. You just enter a bunch of words into it, and it will tell you what, SHA-256, what, if you run those words, through SHA-256 as the input, what is the output, basically. You can think about it that way. And so people would create brain wallets doing that. Like they would think of their favorite quote from their favorite book, and they would make that the words that corresponded to their private key when run through SHA-256. And so people knew this was happening, and they would just find, famous passages from famous novels and run them through SHA-256. And sure enough, it turned out there was Bitcoin in a lot of those. The Bitcoin would get stolen instantly. It was almost a game for a while. People would just put a tiny amount of Bitcoin in there to see how fast it would get stolen. And the really common ones, the really common brain wallets, it would get stolen in 5 seconds. So, you can easily find the private key for a Bitcoin wallet just by coming up with any random string of words, numbers, whatever, running it through SHA-256. But all the ones that are predictable, people are already monitoring them and stealing anything that goes into those automatically. And if you use something that's close to truly random, there's probably not going to be anything in it, because you're literally picking out one atom from the sun. Maybe cryptographers or mathematicians would quibble with the number there, but it's such a huge number, you can think of it as being immense, like the number of atoms in the sun. We have all spent our childhood being warned of the dangers of AI, yet when it actually becomes relevant, we are in a race to get there ASAP. True. The highest prediction I have from Supergrok to the price of it at the end of 2026 is 450. I saw a post on Twitter about Next token has officially launched. Ooh, I haven't seen that yet. Tag me in it if you see it. Need two economies: internal, basically free money to use to trade local goods, then foreign money that is local resource backed to import needed goods and securities. There are countries that do that. There are actually countries that do that. Follow educators, not influencers. Yeah, but I feel like you can blast through so many combos per minute. I mean, go for it. there many dudes have tried it. Try to go find a Bitcoin wallet. Try to crack a Bitcoin wallet that actually has something in it, and you'll discover the very large numbers you're dealing with. Being bank sucks. Yep. ES2. Okay. United States of Earth. Yeah. United States of Earth sounds okay. United Soviet Socialist Republic of Humans doesn't sound so good to me. I hate to be an ass, but atoms can't exist in the sun. So, what do you think the sun's made out of? What elements do you think the sun's made out of? Peace on Earth means chips planted in brain. I hope not. Thanks. I'll have to think about that concept for a while. No government system is good or bad. They all have the same flaw, greed and corruption. I would argue that some are much worse than others. Like I'm very happy to be living in, Western industrialized world 2026 versus Maoist China or Stalinist Siberia. So I would argue there's a huge delta between those things. Finding an address with a balance is like finding a particular grain of sand, but not only do you not know what beach it's on, you don't know what country, what continent, or even which planet it's on. Yep. I have no idea what number I just typed, but that is the number of combinations available for a wallet. So basically nothing can crack it right now. Yep. Schrodinger's wallet. Yep. Remember when the global one world order comes for you, the government can turn the light bulb off at their will, meaning your brain chip implant, hydrogen mostly. Yep. Hydrogen. The sun is hydrogen. Okay, let's move on here, guys. We've talked about this one quite a bit. Okay, here's some good news. We saw this post just yesterday, Shield USD, and it was tied to a couple of announcements. So there's a couple entities tied up in this. We've got W3I, Moneta, NBX, and Hoskinson Family Office. So this is kind of interesting. We talk about stablecoins a bit here on this channel, and I always mention Moneta. So I was really happy to see this. So if we go to this actual website, let's go to the actual website. You guys can see the big article, the big announcement. See if it'll come up. W3I software to build Shield USD, a privacy-preserving USD stablecoin for the Midnight Network. This came out just yesterday morning. So, and you can tell by the address, West Lafayette, Indiana. You can tell this is going to be a Moneta thing. This is great. Shield USD is being developed to support real-world payments and financial workflows that require confidentiality. I mean, if you're in crypto and you understand privacy at all, you already know why a privacy-based stablecoin would be super valuable. As stablecoins mature, privacy is emerging as a core requirement rather than an afterthought. Privacy is not a luxury feature, is a prerequisite for mainstream finance, said Gillian Plomin, CEO of W3I Software. Shield USD is our answer to a clear market gap. Institutions need confidentiality, users need dignity, and regulators need clarity. Midnight's design makes it possible to deliver all three without compromising the utility of an open, programmable financial system. I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather use a stablecoin that meets these parameters. I would much rather use a stablecoin that meets these parameters rather than USDC or Tether. I think that makes a lot more sense to me. So the interesting thing, the thing I didn't know, so we've talked a little bit about NBX before, and people mentioned some rumblings about something between Moneta and NBX. We've covered things that were between these two entities before, but W3I seems like a much bigger endeavor. And I noticed at the bottom of this sort of press release, this other press release that says, Hoskinson Family Office Inc. invests $1.5 million in W3I Software Inc., supporting the growth of Cardano's regulated DeFi future. And I think this was from back in the spring, maybe. When was this? Yeah, March. Back in March, it looks like Charles's family office invested $1.5 million in W3I. So I think this is a pretty big deal. And I'm super glad. I think we kind of knew that we're going to be privacy-based stablecoins on Midnight, but I don't think we had actually heard any names. So let's see. Charles DVNC said Charles did a great interview on Corey Costa's YouTube about 6 hours ago. Let me show you your world without sin. Is this Serenity, the Serenity, the sci-fi, like the movie based on the sci-fi series? Is it that Serenity? Let's see. DVNC says, I'm glad he's off Twitter, but also glad he's not completely gone. Yeah, me too. Me too. So we've got that to look forward to on midnight. We've also got this. So something went right. Okay, yeah, that's right. Firefly, the movie based on the series Firefly. Everybody always talks about how they're so sad that Firefly got canceled. So I won't talk about it, but I am also sad that Firefly got canceled. That was a huge mistake for sure. Okay. So this was a good headline. Something went right in Washington today, recently at least. Trump indicated no intention to pardon Sam Bankman-Fried. I think everybody was pretty excited about this. Andre had an interesting comment. Let Diddy get him inside. I'm afraid that Diddy and Sam Bankman-Fried, based on their proclivities prior to confinement, would just become some kind of a romantic couplet inside. I think those two might get along great. So I think Diddy and Sam Bankman-Fried probably would like each other very much, a little too much maybe. So we also got this news, which was not good. So we've kind of known this was coming for quite a while. So this post says California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a bill allowing the state to transfer custody of any Bitcoin or cryptocurrency held on exchanges after 3 years of inactivity. Under the law, inactive accounts on centralized exchanges are basically declared to be abandoned. So definitely on this channel, I always talk about self-custody. I think self-custody is super, super important. And the only way anybody should really be participating in crypto. It's a huge theme of this channel. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who are hodling, and for whatever reason, they refuse to self-custody their stuff and they just keep it on Coinbase, Kraken, name your centralized exchange. So people pointed out, people said like, yeah, but a lot of people tried to rationalize this and say, yeah, but you you deserve to lose your crypto if you don't self-custody it and you don't touch it for 3 years. It really is abandoned. I don't feel that way. I think I think there are a lot of people hodling. I have a friend. I've talked about this guy before. Smart guy, close friend of mine. He has ADA. He refuses to take his ADA off Coinbase. It's been on Coinbase for at least 3 years. I'm sure he talks to me about his ADA all the time. It just sits on Coinbase. Like his ADA would be eligible for forfeiture under Gavin Newsom's new law here. And that dude has not abandoned his ADA. He's just too lazy he's smart, but he's too lazy or doesn't understand as much as I've tried to explain them to him, doesn't understand the benefits of self-custody. He just keeps it on Coinbase. So there are people who have not abandoned their crypto assets, who refuse to self-custody it and just keep it on a centralized exchange. So I think this is going to cause some massive problems, this bill in California. Is it also a great way for Gavin Newsom to fuck with the crypto people? Yes. That's why I think this is really just a direct attack on crypto. Because I mean, I've got fiat accounts that have sat untouched for years at a time, and nobody's ever tried to confiscate those. That's never been an issue. I've never had the government come along and say, hey, you haven't touched your savings account in 3 years. We're taking it. That's not a thing that's happened. Flying Hambone says that's messed up, Gavin. Yep. What's considered inactive? Do I have to be trading or login? I don't even know at this point if it's logins or if you actually have to move it. I don't know, but it's pretty messed up either way. Government is depending on the uneducated trendies that jump in on crypto based on pumps, then just lose interest if they didn't moon. I had to move all my friend's stuff to a new wallet because he put the keys on his computer in a notepad. Oh my God. Yeah. Worst mistake ever. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big mistake. Obviously, you can see the financial motive for a broke state like California to go after people's crypto. They could make a lot of money. They probably know exactly how much, they've probably gotten enough data out of Coinbase for, like, under the guise of like, fighting tax evasion or whatever, from Coinbase and their centralized exchanges. They probably know already or have a pretty good projection of how much abandoned crypto there is on centralized exchanges. And I'm sure, their definition of abandoned, I'm sure it's like an incredible amount. Scott Bessent spoke today at Economic Club in Minnesota. Omar Wright says bank addicts leaving their crypto on sexes because they think of them as banks. Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much what's going on. Or even like they're even almost like equities guys. You know what I mean? They have a portfolio with a broker. They don't really worry about it because there's not a mechanism for the broker to like steal your Nvidia stock. So at least on such a short-term basis, three years. But okay, Matt says gas prices plummeted 60 cents per gallon in the last 3 weeks. Yep, that's been awesome to see. I do not have a gas car right now, only the electric, so it doesn't really affect me, but I'm happy for everybody I know with gas cars. So here's something else interesting that's been going on. So yesterday we covered Trump's announcement that maybe he would ban institutional investors from buying single family homes, right? And people had questions about that. People were like, I don't think this will affect the markets, comments like that. And I pointed out, let's see, I'll give you guys the stats because they're kind of interesting. So here's why I made this post. Institutional buying hugely impacts markets. Here's an example. Invitation Homes, which you might know was formed by Blackstone. That's a Blackstone entity. Invitation Homes bought up huge tracts of homes in places like Vegas after the GFC. So if you're not aware, when prices plummeted in places like Vegas, these vehicles basically created by private equity just went in and bought up whole tracts of homes. It was like they almost owned like entire blocks of Las Vegas. They bought an incredible number of homes. I know some of the people who were involved in helping them do that. And those people, I think, have regrets about what they helped accomplish in those days, but they made a little dough. But the numbers are crazy. So even as of 2025, and I linked the article. I believe I linked the article that showed this. Yeah, there's the article right there. Even as of 2025, Invitation Homes still owned 3,400 houses in Las Vegas. You might think that's not a large amount. That's actually a huge amount of inventory in a market like this. Here's the number of listings that have been in Vegas over all these years since 2017. It rarely goes over 10K. As recently as 2024, it's been under 5,000 houses. There's only been 5,000 units of inventory in Las Vegas at a certain point in 2024, very recently. And we're talking about 3,400. So an amount that is most of the listing inventory sometimes in Las Vegas. It's a huge amount. Obviously, another question was asked sort of like, is he talking about, them having to dispose of their assets, like drop that inventory on the market? No, he doesn't seem to be talking about anything like that. He just says, I'm immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single family homes. So he's going to turn off the faucet. He doesn't want them to be able to buy more homes, not necessarily that they have to like sell their homes. I think there'd be constitutional problems with that. You can't really do unreasonable seizures in the US under the Constitution. And here was the effect. Real estate giant Blackstone falls 9%. 9% the very next day. This is pretty significant. Blackstone does not like for their stock to fall 9% because the White House decided to be a cool idea to have a tweet. But that's exactly what happened. So this is more just kind of this fourth turning stuff, right? This would be a huge change. Like the whole model that private equity has been relying on in real estate, with the turn of a button, it seems like they're realizing with the turn of a button, all that could go away. So things are changing, guys. Okay. Having a hard time summoning a sympathy for Blackstone, myself as well. Let's see. Omar Wright says, I don't have the equities to think of it that way. Streetwise says, anybody else's audio cutting out for a few seconds here and there? No. Okay, glad to hear that. I don't have the equities to think of it that way. Yep. Grok is not updating gas prices fast at all. The controllers who update national gas prices still have gas listed price at 2 weeks ago price. Okay. You have around 1.6% of the DRep vote. I was just wondering, is there a cap or could we get you to like 10%? There's no cap because there are many, many, many larger than me. I don't really want to be, I would never want to be the biggest. I would never want to be up there as the biggest. I don't think that's good for decentralization. So I would not ever want to be as big as some of the ones that are much larger than me. But no, there's no gap. There's no cap. It's permissionless. State takes custody, can't spend. You can still claim it years later, just like uncashed checks and abandoned bank accounts. Do not log in, trade, or respond to notifications for 3 years. Yeah, that sucks. I don't want them to take custody. So, and yet another reason why, probably a lot of people just like another, sort of thing on the stack, as to why people with money are leaving California. So, okay, let's move along here. Hit a couple more things. This is kind of interesting. So you probably know, we talked about Elon and Sam Altman. Elon says, hey, I helped found OpenAI. I invested money on it, and the whole thing was supposed to be open and nonprofit. Sam Altman turned around just a few years ago and made it not open and not a nonprofit. Mario Knopfel here reporting, Elon scored major win. Judge says plenty of evidence. OpenAI broke its promises. Sends case to jury trial. Sam Altman's worst nightmare is heading to a courtroom. Yeah, I mean, the problem Sam Altman has is it's right in the damn name. It's right in the name. Sam Altman has a company called OpenAI, and he made it not open and not nonprofit. So he's got kind of a problem right at the outset. Fundamentally, if you get some jurors in there who are just thinking logically, they're going to be like, wait, it seems like they called it OpenAI because it was supposed to be this like open source kind of nonprofit. And Elon has all these, Elon has this account of how, the whole thing was supposed to be to prevent, this sort of future we're all talking about where one company controls all the AI. And, Sam Altman went before Congress and talked about how he wasn't getting paid anything as CEO and he didn't have any stock in the company. And he was just doing it because it's too important for humankind. And then it seemed like months later, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's going to be, completely private. And yeah, probably I'll own some shares. I'll own some of those shares. So that's kind of an interesting one. But I think the really hard part about that going to trial is going to be how the hell you find jurors who aren't polarized by either of those two, right? It's like half the people I run into now hate Elon. The other half hate characters like Sam Altman. How do you find somebody who's not in either camp and has never heard of, this controversy between OpenAI or Sam Altman and Elon? So I think it's gonna be pretty hard for them to find jurors, and you might almost have some jurors who it seems like they're gonna have to weed out some dishonesty because there's probably enough like activist type individuals out there who would love to sort of sweet talk their way onto that jury just because they hate either Sam Altman or Elon. So I think jury selection is gonna be a pretty big problem in that particular one, but I wish Elon luck on that, obviously. Okay, so this to me is one of the most important non-tech things going on in the world. We talked a lot about this on a video a couple days ago, so you guys already know my feelings on this, but it looks like everything going on in Iran is just accelerating. Some of the video is just more crazy, incredible images coming out of Iran. The protesters are burning down regime buildings right now. This post is the streets of Iranian cities have turned into battlefields. There's a crazy one. This is the second largest city in Iran, the birthplace of Ali Khamenei. It's crazy. So there was one. Let's see, where was the um okay, let's see. Oh yeah. This one is quite crazy. Just the number of people involved in these protests. So, man, all I can see as I watch this is definitely my fingers are crossed for all Iranians that they can finally rejoin the international community. So it's kind of crazy. Iranians, I think, of all backgrounds, ethnicities, you know, Persian, Persian Azeris, Persian Assyrians, Persian Armenians, Persian Jews, like every Iranian, I think, is going to benefit from this regime ending and the people of Iran being able to rejoin the international community. It's such a crazy thing this has gone on for so many decades. Such such an incredible, such an incredible civilization that's played such a huge role in sort of the history of that entire region for so long. They've just been kind of locked up and kept away from the rest of the world for so many decades now. This thing ending, I think, is going to be a pretty huge global event, and all of a sudden we'll see. I almost think of it as like an old friend, right? An old friend. Of course, they fought giant civilizational wars, and had a huge presence, in that entire region for thousands and thousands of years. But it's sort of like this player on the global scene that just hasn't been able to participate for decades and decades and decades. And the people of that country are finally going to get to rejoin the rest of the world. So I think this is a pretty big deal. Okay, let's see. Uh, Pucky Hawk says, my Blackstone outdoor skillet air fryer combo is amazing. Next time I run into somebody who works for Blackstone, I'm gonna start talking about air fryers. That's actually a good idea. Sounds like Gavin's trying to grab a bunch of crypto for his broke ass state. Yeah, I think that's going on. I think they're trying to grab any money they can for their state. Exchanges like Gemini hate it since they lose custody. Yeah, I mean, the centralized exchanges would much rather keep those abandoned accounts. They'd much rather have those in their custody. Ignorant Bastard says state can't sell or spend it. They just holding for people till they come claim it. Yeah, but I mean, all states have this thing that we call as cheat to the state. And even for other types of property, a lot of states have these kinds of laws. And eventually, if something's truly abandoned, the state can appropriate it. So I'm sure in the California statutes, they have something similar. And at the end of this period, if it's never like a lot of property, if it's truly abandoned and you never come for it, I'm sure it somehow ends up in their pockets. He doesn't have to force them to sell, just announce he's going to tax their capital gains at 75% and they'll dump it themselves. He doesn't have to force them to sell, just announce he's going to tax their capital gains. Yeah, true. I think of Stephen Mnuchin when the forfeit houses come up. All commies can go home. Yeah, and Google promised not to be evil. How did that turn out? Yep, yep. FYI, I don't agree either. Just adding clarity. Oh yeah, no, I get your. No, I appreciate you just telling us what this proposed law says. I guess it's still a bill. It's still just just a bill. Michael says, "Told you, commies are mafia." The USA government better just take control of OpenAI for our safety, of course. And yeah, I mean, on the other side of the political spectrum, of course, they would say the same thing about XAI. They kind of used to have control of Twitter. This is a chat room. Yeah, this is basically a chat room. That's true. Iran is going to be as free as Venezuela shortly. Yeah, I mean, the regime is still down there in Venezuela, and they're there were videos today of the colectivos running around, like basically going door to door, trying to find people supporting the U.S.'s actions. So, man, I think we got a ways to go before Venezuela is really free. You think Trump pulling a Venezuela on OpenAI would mean safety for? I don't think anybody really thinks that. Like finding qualified lawyers at the DOJ these days. One time it's so funny because I remember a discussion I had with a DOJ attorney in we'll say around DC, probably like God, it's over 20 years ago now, and he was describing some things of the DOJ then, and it's like the things that were going on that everybody was outraged over at the DOJ then were so minor compared to the things that have gone on in the last decade. Like the things that have gone on in the last decade are so much bigger, so much more prominent than the things that this guy was complaining about. And it was like, I thought it was funny when he was telling me about some of these things. I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. But now the things that have gone on since then are just like exponentially more ridiculous. There was no governor in this chat room. True. I'm definitely not the president. This is more like this is a little more anarchic than that, I think. Iran, number 17 most populous country in the world, bigger than Germany. Pretty crazy stuff. Yeah. And I mean, just like such a crazy history, such a hugely significant civilization. And it's just been locked away from the modern world, for decades and decades and decades. Since 79, surely. And, people who find fault with the Shah and things that Savak did would probably push that date back, even to the Shah's days because of, some of the things that were going on. But man, yeah, the Iranian people, whether Persian or not, non-Persians as well in Iran, there are many, they deserve better than what they've gotten for sure. I'm sure Washington would never do anything that is counter to the interest of us loyal citizens or the founding principles for a nation. Of course not, right? I have a degree in copyright law, but I'm drinking right now, so I shall judge you all tomorrow. There you go. Is Iran going to need a trustless security forward solution for store of value and exchange? I think maybe they do. We've probably got some number of Persian speakers in the Cardano community for sure. So maybe we should start talking to them. Maybe we should start getting everybody together and working on that. It's honestly not a bad. It probably wouldn't be a bad allocation of resources if we just went to work and created a post-clerical Iran Cardano lobbying unit. Right? It's like how many Persian speakers do we have in Cardano? That would be the first thing to figure out, right? How many Farsi speakers? I guess we're supposed to say Persian now. They decided that in English, the language would be called Persian instead of Farsi. So certain academics have taken a pretty strong stand on that, even though it doesn't totally, I won't get into it. Anyways, we've probably got some Farsi speakers in Cardano. We should get them together and just create a Cardano Iran lobbying unit for, just like expecting that we're going to get a post-clerical Iran. That might not be a bad idea. Pucky Hawk says Iran used to be amazing until 1979. A lot of the people there remember. Yep. Whoa. And I'm sure they will make it as difficult as possible to reclaim. They're in a blackout right now. Yep. No internet in Iran at the moment, from what I've read, except for Elon's satellites. Hard to believe they're short on DOJ lawyers now and hiring more. Yep. Such a coincidence. All these oil-rich nations need so much help from us lately. Yeah, I mean, the big joke, one of the funniest jokes I've heard about this topic is that the Saudi Air Force can't operate outside of air conditioning, which there seems to be some truth in that, right? It's like they buy the planes from us, but the joke is that they can't operate outside air conditioning. So there's that. Anyone with Starlink has it. Yep. Alexander of Macedonia knew how to handle the Persians. Yeah, I mean, that was, yeah, I mean, times long ago, Alexander the Great, he was quite the conqueror. But I think in this case, we just need to let Iran rejoin the international community, and they will take care of themselves. We just need to get them. We just need to allow Iran to blossom as part of the international community. I think that's all that's necessary. The people will do the rest. The people will do the work. Nobody needs to handle them. They will just do it as soon as they're in a post-clerical world. Iran was Persia, a very rich and interesting history, and up until very recently, we're very romantic. Yeah, I mean, there's beautiful things. Yeah, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of history between the U.S. intelligence community and the Shah's regime, and you know, the rise of Khomeini. There's a long, very interesting history there. So, saw some news on XRP is working with AWS. Any news on how Google will use Night Ada? I haven't heard anything yet. I haven't heard anything good. Ada Ada pack. Ada pack. I like it. Everybody is going to need lots of power in the AI age. Yeah, power is going to be a really big deal. Chair force is the same in any nation. Fair enough. Fair enough. China is developing MSRs based on our technology research. Which type of what is the MSR you're referring to? Just tell me what the acronym is. Laugh out loud. That is where I Dream of Jeannie is from. You're doing I Dream of Jeannie, the black and white like 50s show. I definitely watched it as a kid. Molten salt. Oh, molten salt reactors. Oh, interesting. Yeah, you know, as much as people talk shit about the price of solar, I think wind kind of sucks. I know some people who install wind the giant windmills, but solar, even though it costs so much to install it in the Western United States, we have so much, there's so much barren land we could put solar panels on. And Elon lays out the exact number of acres of land of solar you would need to power the entire United States. It's not that much. There is plenty of room in Nevada, plenty of land in Nevada for that kind of stuff. Instead of putting nuclear in Nevada, you could just put solar panels. Huge upfront investment. What is Elon? Elon did this in one of his investor meetings a couple of years ago. What did he say? It was 50 trillion. He said if we spent 50 trillion on replenishable energy, renewable energy, we would be good. We could power the whole world, I think he said, for 50 trillion. But to power the United States, it's a shockingly small number of acres. You could just do it in Nevada. And there's plenty of uninhabited land out there, the right amount of sunshine. We could do it. It's just the upfront cost. Nobody wants to pay the upfront cost because oil's too easy. Mass surveillance repository. That would be yeah, I know where I've been near one of those recently. I've definitely been near one of those. Damn. Jay Marie, thanks for joining. Oh, nice. Let's see. Chalk Milk says, I enjoyed the windmills driving through Kansas and Oklahoma. Poor birds, but some of them are huge and it's pretty cool. Seeing I've driven through spots like that. They are enormous. It's kind of crazy how enormous they are, and they definitely kill birds. We developed them for airplanes that would not need to land. To refuel. Oh, the molten salt reactors. Really? Those can be airborne? I guess I don't know anything about molten salt reactors. Okay, very interesting. I'll have to God, I'm afraid you're going to cause me to go down some kind of a Wikipedia research hole or Grokpedia research hole. I kind of wish I hadn't heard those words, because now I know I'm gonna have to look into this. So Arizona has sandstorms. I had the paint taken off the side of my car by one. That would have to be a really good solar panel. I mean, they have them. They have them. They do have them already, and they operate. They work. It's just a big upfront investment. So, yeah, totally is. And a lot of the neighboring states too, same story. Um, Wind, solar, nuclear, in my opinion. Yeah, that's how I feel too. Wind, I'm kind of like, wind is kind of like, but solar and nuclear for sure. Still lots of cheap land in Nevada. Almost bought a mountain, 40 acres for 60K. Yeah, super cheap for sure. Because it's not all like Vegas. A lot of it is also hot in the summer, but cold in the winter. So there's a lot of high desert shit. So it's not very desirable from a climate perspective. The sad thing about wind turbines is when they started killing bald eagles in California, Congress passed a bill that ignored the old protected bird law previously in law. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they definitely birds die when they're giant flying blades cruising through the air. Yeah, one of the saddest things I saw was when the power companies figured out they should go and lobby all the states so that people could not pump energy from their solar panels back into the grid and get paid for it. It was super awesome. I was in a place at a time when you could just pump power back into the grid and the power company had to pay you for it. It was awesome. It was awesome. But immediately the power companies figured that out, went and lobbied the state legislatures, put an end to that shit. And of course, the consumers are not unified enough to be able to fight back. Like they don't instantly form their own lobby to go and oppose the power companies. So the power companies win on that one, which kind of sucks. But D's a bird. D's a bird. So I think we've covered all of the news. The thing I'm most excited for outside of sort of tech and crypto is definitely for the Iranian people to have freedom for the first time in a lot of decades. I was really excited at the prospect of the Venezuelan people not having to deal with an oppressive regime anymore. Just like I'm excited for the Iranian people to rejoin the international community. These are the things I'm most excited for. The thing that I think is like the most significant inside the tech world, though, is definitely this draining of the code moat. This draining of the code moat is going to be so impactful, not just for, technology proper, but also technology as an asset. Everything's going to change. I mean, can you imagine if every company with a software moat, you know, suddenly starts dropping like a bowling ball in the equities markets? I mean, you could argue that that's maybe already happening in slow motion, or maybe it hasn't started yet and it will happen soon, but pretty impactful. Brown Beardo says the problem is that they aren't lobbying hard enough for the desolate areas. Instead, they are pestering areas with low economic activity, like the county I live in now. Lots of Amish and Mennonites. So, okay, I think I can probably maybe guess what state you might be in. Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. Definitely, um, definitely Definitely, things get put in the wrong places in the US. Definitely things get put in the wrong places. We have a lot of open land and things definitely get put in the wrong places. Okay. Bald eagle is nuisance bird in Alaska. Yeah, it's super funny in the lower 48. People, even in places where there are bald eagles, people are kind of amazed when they see a bald eagle. And then literally they're like seagulls in Alaska. It's crazy. Farmers are also against the renewable energy contractors here. Yep. I'm familiar with that phenomenon for sure. Kurt Sorensen on MSRs. We wanted an airborne nuclear strike force like the submarines. Didn't use them because they don't make fissile materials. Oh, okay. Interesting. Good to know. Good luck draining your nocturnal emissions, guys. Yep. Think they will take down GitHub. I think GitHub would just like get cloned, and have many competitors, that kind of thing. I'd take solar panels over fracking. Dumpster chickens, yep, bald eagles for sure. So I think that is the biggest thing going on in tech right now. I think all of the AI stuff, all of the post labor economic stuff. I think it's all actually good for blockchains because like at this point, we all realize you can clone blockchains. Like somebody could recreate a Cardano, just like Midnight is just basically taking a grab bag of different components from other blockchains. Like you can clone blockchains, but in crypto, it's already really obvious to us that it doesn't do any good unless you have a community who's going to use that blockchain. Like it's all about the usage of the blockchain. Like the technology, because of the nature of blockchains, like true public blockchains, the code is all basically there, right? We already know because it's all decentralized and distributed in proper blockchains. The code is not the moat. The community is already the moat in the crypto world. So we're already kind of familiar with this, but I think the rest of the world doesn't realize this yet. The rest of the world is going to discover this over the next, maybe even just the next 5 years, maybe the next 3 years. We don't know how fast it's going to happen. People always say that basically humans overestimate the amount of change that will happen over the short term, and they underestimate the amount of change that will happen over the long term. I think that's probably true of this like it is of everything else. But man, I think in 10 years, things are going to look very different. And I think these people like Elon and David Shapiro are right that the value of software is rapidly changing. So Brown Beardo says Stack Overflow will come down first. Pucky Hawk likes fracking. Says it's quite neat and actually quite safe. Okay. Don't want to be an Alaskan fisherman? I don't think I'd want to be in like the Bering Sea as a crab fisherman. I don't think that would be my chosen way to risk my life, although lucrative, well paid as far as fishermen go, but until your water starts to burn. So, okay, you guys can argue about fracking some other place. That is well beyond the scope of this channel, but it's okay. It's okay for people to disagree on fracking. I'll let you guys fight that out somewhere else. But I hope everybody is having a fantastic week. I hope you had a fantastic week. So obviously, most people watch this episode on Friday. So this will be the last episode of the week. But I hope everybody had a great week. I hope you're looking forward to a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon.